The final act of Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, or as we called it back in my day, Metal Gear Solid 3, kicks off after Snake has planted the C3 throughout the Grozny Grad hangar. The Shagohod, the nuclear-equipped tank Volgin forced Sokolov to build for him, is now operational, and Snake hopes to bring it down, along with the hangar, before the Colonel can replicate and mass-produce the powerful war machine. But before he can escape, Volgin and Ocelot call out to Snake, revealing that they've captured Eva, the self-proclaimed KGB spy, and supposed former NSA codebreaker who's been helping him throughout his mission. Snake and Eva have a blossoming relationship, and they plan to flee the hangar together. So naturally, Snake tries to come to her rescue. It's then that the boss flanks him and takes him out using CQC, the hand-to-hand combat style they developed together. It's a brief moment, but it goes a long way to reinforcing one of Snake Eater's key themes, the legendary skills of the boss, and Snake's continued existence in her shadow. If you've been keeping score at home, this is the 4th time now that the boss has mopped the floor with Snake in close quarters combat. Snake's never been particularly close to beating her. She always defeats him in embarrassing fashion, disarming him and tossing him to the ground with ease. There's a dismissive nature to her victories over him. Snake comes off looking like a rookie who just got schooled by a seasoned veteran. You can see how much it bruises his ego to lose to his former mentor, all which sets up for their upcoming duel to the death at the end of the game. Held at gunpoint by Ocelot, Snake watches as Volgin tortures Eva. He reveals that she broke into his underground vault and stole the Philosopher's Legacy, or more specifically, a microfilm containing all the information on the Philosopher's Legacy. We've heard about the Philosophers and their legacy in bits and pieces, but it's here that the villainous Colonel spells it out for us. With the 20-minute timer on the C3 counting down in the background, it's one of many moments in the game that has a distinctly James Bond-like vibe to it. Sure, there's no super slow death machine, but Volgin can't help himself. He needs to monologue before he kills Snake. And Snake, of course, isn't about to stop him. The longer Volgin talks, the more time he burns off the clock. According to Volgin, the Philosophers were a group of influential individuals from the United States, Russia, and China who came together to stop the Axis powers in World War II. To that end, they pooled their vast resources, funding powerful weapons like the atomic bomb and units like the Cobras. What remains of that wealth has come to be known as the Philosopher's Legacy, and there's still tons of it to go around. Volgin claims that they had enough cash to fight World War II 5 times over. That's an unfathomable amount of money, essentially infinite wealth, enough to finance any project or endeavor the mind can conjure up. After the war, the legacy was supposed to be divided evenly amongst the United States, Russia, and China. But thanks to Volgin's father, who was a member of the Philosophers, and from the sounds of it, essentially their bookkeeper, the legacy ended up in Russia's hands alone. Volgin's father laundered the money through banks all over the world, and seemingly documented all of this on the microfilm. So the Philosopher's Legacy is the nearly endless pool of wealth itself, and the microfilm is, for lack of a better term, the transaction log. He who controls the microfilm has access to the banks where the legacy is kept, and he who controls the legacy has more money than God. Volgin goes on to explain that after his father's death, he obtained the microfilm, and used the funds to build Grozny Grad and the Shagohod with the support of Brezhnev, Khrushchev's rival. Because of his position in the GRU, the Russian Intelligence Directorate, he couldn't capture Sokolov directly, and instead used the Philosopher's spy network to convince the boss and her Cobra unit to defect. With the combined might of the Cobras and the Shagohod, Volgin believes that he could bring order to the world and unite it as one, as it once was before the Philosophers started fighting amongst themselves. This motive might seem a bit too altruistic for a character as vile as Volgin, and even similar to the interests of other characters, both heroes and villains, throughout the franchise. But it's important to remember that it would be a world order imposed through fear and discipline, where the leaders of nations would constantly be looking over their shoulder for the Cobras and the nuclear-equipped Shagohod. And with all that might and terror behind him, it would be Volgin, arrogant and impulsive Volgin, ruling from the shadows. Before we move on, though we know for certain that Volgin is the son of the Philosophers, I can't help but wonder if he owes his lightning abilities to them as well. We never find out the origins of his powers, even in the other Metal Gear Solid games, and I, personally, think it would add some interesting depth to his character if he gained them through the experiments of the Philosophers. Perhaps there was some sort of research program that his father entered him into when he was young. With his monologue over, Volgin entrusts the Philosopher's Legacy to the boss. She provides an assessment of Snake's own motives, noting that he wouldn't have come back to Grozny Grad without reason, and pointing out that the C3 has been stolen. She says she'll check to make sure he didn't use it against them, and declares that she'll dispose of Eva. As she's picking her up off the ground, she whispers to her, telling her,
"Leave everything to me."
This is the first of several clues we're about to receive with regards to the boss's true intentions. Just like the spy films that surely inspired Snake Eater's creation, many of the main characters are about to switch sides here in the game's final hours, so buckle up for some classic espionage shenanigans. Focusing on the boss for a moment, though we'll dive into her spy games later on, what stands out to me here and now is how the game uses Volgin to continue to illustrate her superiority in the sphere of warfare. Volgin might be in charge of this operation, but he's constantly deferring to the boss and entrusting her with key tasks and information, like he does by handing her the legacy. It might be further evidence of his arrogance, or a sign of his incompetence, and I do think you can make that argument, but as I see it, it seems to have more to do with his belief in her as a living legend than anything else. As the boss and Eva depart, Ocelot steps between Snake and Volgin, and asks his commander for permission to, at long last, get his revenge. Ocelot's rivalry with Snake here in Metal Gear Solid 3 is something of a mirror image of Snake's own back and forth with the boss. Just as Snake lives in the boss's shadow and tries to escape it every time he engages her in CQC, so too is Ocelot trying to prove himself to Snake. They're on opposing sides, so Snake isn't his mentor, not yet, anyway, but earlier in the game, Ocelot started using revolvers, a signature part of his gimmick, at Snake's suggestion. Later on, we'll see that he even practices his hand-to-hand combat because of Snake's influence. So it's clear that Ocelot views Snake as not just a rival, but as someone to aspire to. This creates a mentor-mentee relationship that starts with the boss at the top, extends down to Snake, and rounds out with Ocelot at the bottom. Each rung of this ladder is trying to demonstrate their worthiness to the veteran above them, and is determined to get their lick back after numerous defeats. Even Snake's responses to Ocelot after he's beaten him have been similar to the way the boss treats him. He's dismissive of his younger rival, but often imparts a word or two of advice in a harsh but professorial tone, like when he called out his gun grip and recommended he start using revolvers. Whether it's the boss or Snake, both warriors are passing down what they know and what they've learned to the next generation through tough love and the occasional informative ass-kicking. But Volgin doesn't give a shit about what Ocelot wants, and refuses to let him fight Snake. Furious, Ocelot turns one of his revolvers on Volgin, and receives an electrified warning shot for his troubles. Ocelot's allegiances are about to become rather muddled, especially once we reach the conclusion. But for now, when trying to understand why he does what he does, it's best to circle back to his continued determination to prove himself to Snake. He cares more about that than any faction or country, something that becomes very clear in the fourth Metal Gear Solid game, Guns of the Patriots. With Ocelot dismissed, Volgin activates a lift that drops Snake down a level, forming an arena for the two of them to do battle in. Ocelot, in a display of respect for his rival, tosses Snake's pistol and knife, which had been taken by the boss, down to him. A boss fight then ensues, with Ocelot continuing to support Snake by throwing ammo to him. It's an exciting battle, due in large part to its time limit. In 5 minutes, the C3 will explode, bringing the hangar down and both of them along with it. There are plenty of effective ways to defeat Volgin here, but going back to the original, I've always enjoyed taking him down with CQC. It's a bit tricky to pull off and it takes a while. You'll be right up against the clock if you do it. But given the importance of this hand-to-hand combat technique to the overarching story, it just feels thematically appropriate, and it transforms the showdown into something of an 80s pro wrestling match, with Snake serving as the heroic American going blow for blow with the unstoppable Russian adversary. At half health, Volgin will enter his second phase, prompting a cutscene in which he'll order Ocelot to shoot at Snake. Ocelot refuses, in yet another illustration of the rival-slash-mentor-mentee relationship we've been talking about. Volgin might be essentially down in a pit, and he might be on the verge of losing to Snake, but it still says a lot about Ocelot's respect for Snake that he declines to follow the orders of not just his commanding officer, but a dude who can literally shoot lightning at him. And in a display of his own emerging skills, Ocelot uses his revolver to block a blast from Volgin. It's then that word goes out about the C3 explosives, and Ocelot departs, leaving the two combatants to finish their duel. Once Snake has defeated Volgin, he'll escape the pit, and the hangar with the help of Eva, as the entire building explodes behind them. As you'd expect, Snake is surprised to see her. The last time he saw her, she was with the boss, who promised to finish her off for Volgin. Eva explains that the boss let her go, and that she's waiting for him at the lake, where, conveniently, Eva's parked their getaway vehicle, a Wig aircraft. Snake is, understandably, confused by the boss's actions, and no doubt the player is too at this point, which builds some serious anticipation for their looming confrontation. Snake can't leave until he defeats her, and you can see his hesitancy here about going forward with the rest of his mission. She's his mentor, after all, and with her motives more in question now than they've ever been, it's clear that our protagonist is conflicted. But Snake has little time to consider any of this, as the Shagohod comes storming out of the hangar, with the surviving Volgin in the driver's seat. This is a Metal Gear Solid game, after all. It wouldn't be right to end it without a battle with the Metal Gear, and the Shagohod is, basically, a precursor to those iconic mechs. Volgin's return at the helm of the Shagohod kicks off a chase scene, in which Eva and Snake try to evade the all-powerful tank on the former's bike. It's an exciting sequence, full of the kind of cinematic video game design that helped make Kojima a household name. I'm about to mention the director of the original game here and there, so let me say, for the record, that I'm well aware that he had no involvement in this remake. But Metal Gear Solid Delta is pretty damn faithful to the original. The shots are very nearly the same, and even the dialogue and voice acting was carried over. Thus, I think his intentions and influence are just as important to discuss as we break down this game as I do when I cover the Silent Hill 2 remake, which did have Masahiro Ito on the team, but took some occasional liberties with the narrative. In Metal Gear Solid Delta, however, few liberties were taken. It's very much a modernized version of Kojima's game. So when I do mention Kojima, keep in mind that I'm referencing his enduring legacy on this game and this franchise, and fully aware of the inexcusable way Konami treated him. But back to the chase scene, it also helps to further characterize Volgin and Ocelot. Volgin doesn't give a fuck who or what he destroys when he's controlling the Shagohod. His own men, Grozny Grad itself, it doesn't matter. It speaks to the world Volgin envisions, to a new world that is united in fear of his power and strength. As for Ocelot, he does everything he can to catch up to Snake in a continued effort to get his revenge. He even gets burned by the Shagohod's engines in the attempt, and at one point gets rescued by Snake thanks to a timely shot from his RPG. Eventually, Snake and Eva try to take out the Shagohod by blowing up a bridge as it drives over it, but even that doesn't stop Volgin and his all-powerful tank. To bring it down, Snake engages Volgin and the Shagohod in a two-part boss fight. In the first phase, Snake attacks it with the RPG from the sidecar of Eva's bike as she tries to evade the tank's attacks. In the second, Volgin emerges from the tank, using its cords and its lightning to control it, while Snake attacks him from the ground and Eva tries to keep him busy. Eva's far from Metal Gear Solid Delta's best written character. She often shifts between a combination of a Bond girl and a femme fatale and a serious spy at a moment's notice. But she does get some strong moments here at the end of the game. Blowing up the bridge was her plan. She's damn good at driving the bike, and she uses what she's learned about Volgin from her time spying on him to manipulate him and take advantage of his overly aggressive nature, giving Snake the openings he needs to do some serious damage. For the most part, I'm going to try and focus on the latter in my analysis of her character, because those are the elements that will be further emphasized come Metal Gear Solid 4, where she returns to the franchise. Ultimately, it's not our protagonist or his comrade who takes out Volgin, but a bolt of lightning from an incoming storm. It's a bit underwhelming and some classic heavy-handedness from Kojima, but it speaks to Volgin's arrogance, to his steadfast belief that the philosopher's legacy makes him invincible, and that nothing can bring him down. And fittingly, it's the natural force of the weather itself that proves to be his undoing. With Volgin defeated, it's out of the frying pan and into the fire for Snake and Eva, as Volgin's remaining forces come after them. There's another chase scene, one that ends when they crash the bike and go over a cliff and down into the jungle below. Eva ends up getting severely wounded, and Snake is forced to use his emerging first aid skills to patch her up. There are some strong character moments for both of them in this scene, as well as much of the Kojima cheesiness you'd expect from a budding romance. Namely, there are multiple moments where it looks like Snake is about to open up to her, only to pull back and say something like he needs her to fly the wig. Again, it's mostly just more of the old school spy movie stuff, but it still shows us where Snake's character and mindset is at this point in the game. It's obvious that he has feelings for Eva, but he's still too hung up on the boss's betrayal to make himself available to her. The boss's betrayal really shook Snake to his core. The woman who raised him, who he fought alongside for decades, all of a sudden up and defected from a country that viewed her as one of its foremost war heroes. And now, as his final confrontation with her draws near, her reasons for doing so are even more in question than they were before, taking his focus away from developing any kinds of new bonds or relationships. From there, we progress to the game's last extended gameplay level, as Snake is tasked with guiding Eva to the lake, where both the wig and the boss are waiting. It's here that all of Metal Gear Solid Delta's gameplay elements come together. To keep Eva safe and upright, you'll need to keep her well fed, and sneak past Volgin's remaining forces using stealth and all the combat techniques you have at your disposal. At the lake, Eva starts up the wig, while Snake goes off to a nearby field of white flowers to confront the boss. I've always loved the imagery of this scene. These two legends, these gods of war, confronting one another amidst a field of beautiful foliage. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, then you know I'm a huge From Software fan. I'd bet my house that this scenery inspired Bloodborne's final battle with Gehrman. They're completely different games, and Miyazaki and Kojima are about as different artistically as two directors could possibly be. But both the Gehrman boss fight and this one are duels to the death between a master and their apprentice amidst a field of white flowers. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the Bloodborne team took some notes from Metal Gear Solid on this one. The boss fight with the boss is memorable, but we'll talk more about that in a bit, because the battle itself is far less critical than what the boss says before it. After firing off the Davy Crockett at what remains of Grozny Grad, the boss launches into the most important monologue in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. What she says here will come to be known as the boss's will, and it will be interpreted and reinterpreted by numerous individuals in the years to come. It's almost like the Bible or a similar religious text for the characters in the Metal Gear Solid universe. This monologue means different things to different people, and countless characters try to bring their take on her words to life. When I heard they were going to remake Snake Eater, it was this section I was most excited to analyze. So let's slow things down, take it step by step, and break down this world-altering speech.
Life's end. Isn't it beautiful? It's almost tragic. When life ends, it gives off a final lingering aroma. Light is but a farewell gift from the darkness to those on their way to die. I've been waiting, Snake, for a long time. Waiting for your birth, your growth, and the finality of today.
We begin with flowery, pun intended, discussions of life's fleeting and fragile nature, before the boss reveals that she's long been preparing for this moment, for this standoff with Snake. I don't know that it's ever explicitly stated, but I suspect this is an indication that Snake's duels with the other members of the Cobras, the pain, the fear, the end, and the fury, were all part of her plan to test him, to ensure that Snake was ready for his final battle with her. As we'll later learn, their fates, just like her own, had long since been sealed, so I think it makes sense to suspect that even they knew their job was to give Snake their all, just as she herself does, to prove that he deserves the title of Big Boss. It's an iron sharpens iron type philosophy, an extension of the tough love of mentors towards their mentees that we discussed earlier with the boss, Snake, and Ocelot.
Why are you doing this?
Why? To make the world one again. The world used to be whole. But with the end of the Second World War, the philosophers began to fight amongst themselves, and the world was torn apart. The Cobras, my comrades who trained and fought alongside me, were torn apart as well. The foibles of politics and the march of time can turn friends into enemies just as easily as the wind changes. Ridiculous, isn't it? Yesterday's ally becomes today's opposition, and this Cold War? Think back. When I was leading the Cobras, America and Russia were fighting together. Now, consider whether America and Russia will still be enemies in the 21st century. Somehow I doubt it. Enemies change along with the times, the flow of the ages, and we soldiers are forced to play along.
Here, the boss laments the political realities of warfare. During World War II, the Cobras were brought together, despite their differing origins, to fight for a common goal. But when the philosophers splintered into factions, they were divided. There's an inescapable tragedy and sadness in the boss's words. You can tell how close she was with the other Cobras, and hear how much it pained her when the group fell apart. Even without the sorrow to join them and round out the group, it had to be comforting for her to have the band back together for one final mission here in Snake Eater. And while we're on the topic, it's a travesty that we'll never get a game featuring the boss as a protagonist, with the Cobras as her supporting cast. I'd love to see their camaraderie firsthand, and if you're looking for a badass, well-established female character to anchor a video game, then there might not be anyone better suited for that role than the boss. In any case, what the boss is emphasizing here is the value of the camaraderie she once had with the Cobras over the fleeting goals of politicians and nations. She wants to fight for her battle brothers, not some suit in Washington or Moscow.
I didn't raise you and shape you into the man you are today just so we could face each other in battle. A soldier's skills aren't meant to be used to hurt friends. So then what is an enemy? Is there such a thing as an absolute timeless enemy? There is no such thing, and never has been. And the reason is that our enemies are human beings like us. They can only be our enemies in relative terms. The world must be made whole again. The philosophers must be reunited. I will devote my skills to that purpose. And with the Colonel's money, I will achieve that end. Just as I once created the Cobras. They are my family. I may no longer be able to bear children, but I still have a family.
We start with the boss again expressing her regret about the winding ways of politics, particularly that the needs of America have brought her into conflict with Snake, a man she raised and trained. She shouldn't have to fight someone she views as a son and an apprentice for men like LBJ and Khrushchev, but here she is. This, of course, means that for a soldier in the world as it is today, there's no such thing as a true ally, nor even a true enemy, because the allegiances are always going to keep changing with the times. The boss then echoes much of what Volgin said about uniting the world as one, but her view of how to do this is different. She wants to restore the philosophers as a concept, the ruling body behind the machinations of the New World Order, and to use the legacy of the original philosophers to keep the world in a state of wholeness. The implication here, circling back to what she just said about the way politics ruins the camaraderie between soldiers, is that if the world is one and the philosophers are around to keep it that way, then soldiers won't be subjected to the changing whims of world leaders. But, of course, many characters in the franchise will focus more on the New World Order aspect of her words than the actual intentions behind it, leading to one common interpretation of the boss's will. At the end, she, again, echoes her feelings towards the Cobras. They're her people, and it pisses her off that politics broke them apart.
It was November 1st, 1951. I was in the Nevada desert participating in atomic testing. The name Nevada is derived from Spanish, covered in snow, white as snow. And snow is exactly what I saw in that Nevada desert. It froze my blood white. Snake, you were an atomic test subject, weren't you? On Bikini Atoll. That's part of the reason I was drawn to you. You and I are alike. We're both slowly being eaten away by the karma of others. We'll never have the chance to die peacefully of old age. We have no tomorrow. But we can still have hope for the future.
Principally, this is about explaining why the boss took on Snake as an apprentice in the first place, a reminder of one of the many things that makes them similar. But it's also a reference to the importance of nuclear weapons to the overarching narrative of Metal Gear Solid, and a hint that they'll certainly be necessary to ensure the completion of any version of the boss's vision.
In 1960, I saw a vision of the ideal future from space. 3 years earlier, the Soviet Union had succeeded in launching Sputnik, the first man-made satellite in history, into orbit. This came as a huge shock to the United States. In response, America threw everything it had into its own manned spaceflight project, the Mercury program. Even as the Soviets seemed poised to send their first man into space, America was still experimenting with chimpanzees and rockets. The government wanted human data. So they secretly decided to send a human being into space. I was the one they chose. At the time, they didn't have the technology to block out cosmic rays, and whoever they sent up would inevitably be exposed to heavy radiation. That's why they chose me. After all, I'd already been irradiated once. Of course, you won't find any of this in the history books. I could see the planet as it appeared from space. that's when it finally hit me. Space exploration is nothing but another game in the power struggle between the US and the USSR. Politics, economics, the arms race, they're all just arenas for meaningless competition. I'm sure you can see that.
Nowadays, it's common knowledge that the space race was a part of the Cold War, but it sure is crazy to think about how, at the time, billions of dollars were being spent on what essentially amounted to a dick measuring contest between the two biggest countries in the world. Don't get me wrong, plenty of advancements came out of this. Both space and astronauts are cool as hell, but all of that mattered a lot less to the men in charge than winning. In revealing that she was a part of the space race, the boss is listing another way she was manipulated and used by politicians. It was her view of the great green and blue Earth that made her realize this, and more importantly, it showed her the possibility of a world without borders.
But the Earth itself has no boundaries. No East, no West, no Cold War. And the irony of it is, the United States and the Soviet Union are spending billions on their space programs and the missile race, only to arrive at the same conclusion. In the 21st century, everyone will be able to see that we are all just inhabitants of a little celestial body called Earth. A world without communism or capitalism, that is the world I wanted to see.
This is wishful thinking by the boss. We're well into the 21st century now, and we're arguably more divided than ever. But the promise of what she's talking about here, a world without borders, is enough that it inspired her will to become such a force in the minds of those who came after her. Many would try to make a world without communism and capitalism, a world without East and West, a reality thanks to her words here. Her plan was to use the philosophers to achieve this goal, but others will attempt to bring this vision to life in other ways. No matter how you slice it, that key statement, a world without borders, is the core of the boss's will, and you'll see it come up time and time again throughout the Metal Gear Solid franchise. It leads directly into the central conflicts of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Metal Gear Solid 4, and even Metal Gear Solid 5.
But reality continued to betray me. In 1961, I was sent to Cuba, to Bahia de Cochinos. It was part of a CIA-sponsored invasion under the guise of taking Cuban exiles back to their country. But the US government betrayed them. Our weak-kneed president held back their air support. Defenseless, the exiles were annihilated by the Cuban army. All I could do was watch in silence. I was set up by the very country I'd sacrificed so much for, by the very government I dedicated my life to defending. I was driven from the surface world, and I went underground.
The event she's talking about here is the Bay of Pigs incident, an infamously botched mission by the United States that drove a wedge between the CIA and then President John F. Kennedy. Apparently, the boss's involvement in the mission deepened her distrust for the government. The irony here is that many believe the Bay of Pigs incident and the distrust it sowed within the CIA is what led to Kennedy's assassination. But that's a conversation for another time. You could add this to one of the many reasons I would have loved to have seen a game centered on the boss. Where a stake operates between the margins of history, the boss exists within it. And while I don't think it would be a good idea to depict the Bay of Pigs incident in game, I do think it would be interesting to see her growing distrust with politics in the United States in the years that followed.
Then, 2 years ago, I faced the Sorrow, my old comrade in battle. He was my friend. But one of us had to die. I was left with no choice. The Sorrow gave his life for me. There is no enmity between us. One must live, and one must die. That was the mission. The ones who gave me that mission were the philosophers.
This, again, gets at the core of the problem the boss wants to solve. She doesn't want soldiers to be screwed over by nations and forced to fight their friends, as she was with the Sorrow. Despite their past allegiances, the two of them had no choice. Someone had to win and come back home to complete their mission. The Sorrow understood this. It was just the business of war, essentially. Of course, this only adds to the tragedy of the Sorrow's boss fight. The boss killed him, and yet he aids in her efforts to test Snake nonetheless.
Early in the 20th century, the true holders of power in the United States, the Republic of China, and the newly formed Soviet Union gathered together in a secret meeting that would later be known as the Wise Men's Committee. The secret pact they formed there marked the beginning of the philosophers. But the last of the original members died in the 1930s. After that, the organization began to run out of control, and the Wise Men's Committee degenerated into a mere shell of its former self. The philosophers of today have no sense of good or evil. Their influence extends to countries and organizations involved in every aspect of every war. They have become war itself. That's how they operate. The sacrifices of war cause a shift in the times. This shift leads to renewed conflict, and in turn triggers the next war. Like a nuclear chain reaction, each conflict sparks countless others, forming an endless spiral that will continue on for eternity. Do you understand what I'm saying, Snake? By consuming me and you, the philosophers intend to keep that cycle going forever. It was my father who explained all of this to me. He was one of them. You see, I am the last remaining child of the philosophers. But after he revealed the truth, my father was killed by that same shapeless, formless organization.
With these lines, the boss breaks down the problem with the existing philosophers as they are today. They're no longer devoted to world unity, wholeness, or doing what's best for mankind. They are war as a business. They don't care about their agents like Snake and the boss. All that matters to them is that the money-making machine of weapon sales and warfare keeps on churning. No doubt, part of the boss's vision for a new world includes eliminating these faceless philosophers and replacing them with members who can ensure the realization of the organization as it was originally intended.
And my father isn't the only thing the philosophers have taken from me. In June of 1944, the Cobras and I took part in the landing at Normandy. We'd been given a top-secret mission to locate and destroy enemy V-2 rocket installations. I was pregnant at the time. The sorrow was the father. I gave birth on the field of battle. A beautiful baby boy. But my child was snatched away from me by the philosophers.
In the final flashback piece of the boss's speech, we find out yet another reason that she's so motivated to make her vision of a new, unified world become a reality. The son she had with the sorrow, who the philosophers took from her. For the uninitiated, that son is none other than Ocelot, which adds so much depth to so many of the themes in the game. On one hand, it adds an ironic twist to the rivalry/mentor-mentee ladder that we discussed earlier in the video. By training Snake and imposing some tough love on him every time she's beaten him in CQC, she's inspired his own approach towards her long-lost son. At the same time, it furthers the themes of broken camaraderie, of friendships severed by politics and politicians. The boss has been fighting alongside her own son all along, and she doesn't know it. The sorrow could be here with them, for one big military family reunion, but because of the fleeting nature of enemies and allies, he's not. Ironically, the idea of giving birth on the battlefield and babies being taken from their mothers and the inhumanity of all this was eventually explored by Kojima in Death Stranding. As for mentions of her involvement in World War II, it's yet another reason why I think a game about the boss would have been a gold mine back when Kojima was with Konami. At the same time, there are some serious complications with the whole birth on the battlefield thing from a practical sense. So perhaps that's a moment best saved for lore, and not something that should be shown to us.
Look at this scar. This is proof that I was once a mother. I gave up my body and my child for my country. There is nothing left inside me now. Nothing at all. No hatred, not even regret. And yet sometimes at night, I can still feel the pain creeping up inside me, slithering through my body like a snake. I've never talked this much about myself before. Thanks. Thanks for listening to me. I feel content. Snake, commence the operation. I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life, by your own hand. One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. I'll give you 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, MiGs will come and bomb the hell out of this place. If you can beat me in less than 10 minutes, you'll be able to escape in time. Let's make this the greatest 10 minutes of our lives, Jack.
Boss.
You're a soldier. Finish your mission. Prove your loyalty. Face me.
It's so heartbreaking to see the boss, who's given everything for everyone other than herself, something that would become abundantly clear very soon here, move to such a powerful surge of emotions simply because she had the opportunity to do something for herself and speak about her history. You can tell how much she appreciates this opportunity and how glad she was that it was Snake who was on the receiving end of her monologue. While there are deeper reasons for the boss's desire to fight Snake here, as will be revealed later on, it's almost like her challenge to him here is her way of cementing the point she's been trying to make in his mind. She wants him to remember this, that it was the realities of politics that forced him to kill his mentor, and use it as fuel to inspire him to carry out her vision for a new world. And with that, Metal Gear Solid Delta's final boss fight begins. It's an awesome battle. The scenery really gives it an epic feel, heightened by the game's theme song, which plays when the boss reaches about 25% health. Notably, from a narrative perspective, the developers continued to reinforce the idea that the boss, until the bitter end, was better than Snake in hand-to-hand combat. Try to take her on in CQC, and she'll kick his ass the same way she has the last 4 times they faced off. From a critical perspective, I have to say that although I'm a huge fan of Kojima's recent work on Death Stranding, I have another video coming out on it next week, this duel with the boss, as well as the other boss fights throughout Snake Eater, make me wish he could bring this type of design philosophy back to his games. I really enjoy the more emotional encounters of Death Stranding, but I love how challenging some of these boss fights in Snake Eater are, at least for me. I don't think I one-runned anyone in Snake Eater, and I love that type of thing as a gamer. To me, a good boss fight should take you at least more than one attempt, unless you're playing on an easier difficulty. And I think if he could merge that type of gameplay feel with the impactful battles of Death Stranding, then he'd really be cooking with gas. Once the boss is defeated, she'll hand Snake her Patriot gun and ask him to kill her. He reluctantly does so, and the white flowers turn red. You could call it a symbol of the loss of innocence, but I don't think that's quite it. To me, it's more of an indication that the burden of the boss's vision, her true vision, now falls on the shoulders of Snake, who will henceforth be known as Big Boss. And there's going to be blood, a lot of it represented by the crimson flowers, on the road to making her will a reality. With his mission completed, Snake takes the Philosopher's legacy and returns to Eva. They then take off in the Wig, but before they can get very far, Ocelot catches up with them. He's still hung up on losing to Snake throughout the game. He's not about to let them get away without one last attempt to get his lick back. So he jumps on board the Wig, and after engaging him in some CQC, where Snake shows his own prowess in hand-to-hand combat and Ocelot displays his improving abilities, the two rivals decide to settle their score with what would best be described as a Russian roulette pistol duel. 2 combatants, 2 revolvers, and 1 bullet between them, hidden in the chamber thanks to Ocelot's trademark circus tricks. There are various outcomes here. The gun with the bullet is on the left, and there are unique scenes depending on whether or not you actually take the shot or miss. But in every version of events, the bullet is a blank, and the scene ends with a display of respect between the 2 men. Honestly, it's all over the segment, as they share their true names, with Ocelot revealing that his given name is Ademska, which is a heavy-handed hint and a plot point you probably forgot about from the beginning of the game. Ocelot then jumps out of the wig. It's not long before they're confronted by Russian MiGs, but they're waved off by Khrushchev, indicating that he has surely learned of the mission's success and is, for now anyway, ready to cease the escalating tensions with the United States. Eva and Snake end up flying the wig to Alaska, where they share a glass of wine in a spot by the fireplace together. Primarily, this is more James Bond stuff. The hero gets the girl and celebrates his victory. But it's also a big character moment for both Snake and Eva. On Snake's end, despite his evident interest in Eva, he couldn't have done this before defeating the boss. Her betrayal really loomed over his head, preventing him from opening up emotionally to anyone. For Eva, this furthering of their relationship contributes to her role in Metal Gear Solid 4, where it's revealed that she served as a surrogate mother for Solid Snake and Liquid Snake. When Snake wakes up the next morning, Eva is gone, and she's taken the Philosopher's Legacy with her. On the nearby table, he finds a recorded message from her that plays out over the game's denouement. As it turns out, she's a spy for the Republic of China, the only one of the 3 original countries behind the formation of the Philosophers that wasn't involved in this Cold War drama. But before she joined up with them, she was trained by the Philosophers themselves. It was because of this connection that the boss recognized her and entrusted her with the complete story of her mission. As Snake meets with LBJ and the rest of his team to receive the highest honors the US military has to offer, Eva explains that the boss wasn't a traitor after all. Her defection was planned by the Americans to get the Philosopher's Legacy away from Volgin. But when he fired the Davy Crockett in Russian territory, shit hit the fan, and they're forced to send in Snake to kill the boss to smooth over tensions with Moscow. It is, in truth, the ultimate example of the exploitation of soldiers that the boss has been describing all along. The Americans used her status as a legend to manipulate Volgin, but when they needed to protect the homeland from nuclear annihilation, they were forced to put her down, and forever tarnish her legacy by branding her a war criminal and a traitor to the highest degree. In a world without borders, when united by the philosophers like the boss envisions, this type of thing, at least in theory, anyway, wouldn't happen. She was, in reality, a patriot until the end, but that's not how history will remember her. Broken by this revelation, Snake gives what amounts to a courtesy handshake to LBJ, ignores the attempts of others to cozy up with him, and then visits the boss's grave in Arlington National Cemetery, leaving behind her Patriot gun and a bouquet of white flowers. As the game ends, he cries and salutes her memory. I'm glad the remake is essentially one for one in terms of the pure structure and depiction of most scenes, but one change that I really do love is what they did here with the framing of this scene. In the original, we saw Snake's tears from a first-person point of view. I think it's far more powerful the way it is here, with us seeing his face and the beautiful display of emotion that illustrates just how much the boss meant to him and the incredible burden that now falls on his shoulders. Finally, after a helpful look at the game's timeline, we get a classic Metal Gear Solid moment as we hear Ocelot make 2 phone calls. In the first one, he's talking to the director of the KGB and suggests that they use their knowledge of the Virtuous mission and the Snake Eater mission to blackmail the United States in the future. He then calls up the CIA director and reveals that he was Adam all along, the agent Snake was supposed to meet up with at Sokolov's facility. He also shares that the microfilm taken by Eva was a fake, and that half of the real Philosopher's Legacy now resides with the US, and the rest is with the KGB. In doing so, he's making it clear that he's been a triple agent all along. He appeared to be working for the KGB, but his true loyalties were always far more complicated. All of this sets the stage for Metal Gear Solid 4, where Ocelot's allegiances will continue to come into question until the end of the game. And so ends Metal Gear Solid Delta. Whether or not they continue with these remakes will surely depend on the sales of this one, but I certainly hope to see a modern rendition of Metal Gear Solid 1 at some point in the future. In my opinion, that's where they should have started with these remakes. Don't get me wrong, I very much enjoyed this look back at Metal Gear Solid 3, but 1 and 2 need it more if you ask me. So hopefully we'll get them in the years to come. And if and when we do, I'll be excited to break it all down, just like I did here with Delta. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Dorian Piano, AmiRReza Piano, and Michael Matat for allowing me to use their piano covers for this video. To check out all 3 of these amazing artists, just follow the links down below in the description box. Big shout out to all my Silver and Gold tier YouTube channel members and Patreon subscribers, including James Pruitt, Little Caesar, Reed, Pathonian, Anna Novikova, Sean Bobby, Green, and Draco Woloski, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time, and go birds.